9. Family's last Thanksgiving. In 2016, Joel Guy Sr. and his wife Lisa told their kids they were planning to retire. For their 28-year-old son, Joel Jr., who'd never held a job and relied on his parents to pay the rent for his Baton Rouge apartment, it meant that he would stop receiving their handouts. The couple sold their Knoxville, Tennessee home and held one last Thanksgiving celebration there. But Joel Jr. wasn't willing to accept the changes that were to come, so he devised a sinister plot that he thought would keep the money coming. 2 days after the feast, while he was still in town from Louisiana, Joel Jr. brutally stabbed his father to death while his mum was out of the house. When Lisa arrived home, she too was brutally murdered at the hands of her own son. In a bizarre attempt to conceal evidence, Joel Jr. cut his parents up and tried to dissolve several of their body parts in a bin of acid. He decapitated his mother and boiled it in a pot on the stove. Joel Jr. hoped to collect on his parents' $500,000 life insurance policy, but he received a sobering dose of reality after Lisa's co-worker became concerned about her and asked police to do a welfare check. Officers quickly honed in on Joel Jr. as their prime suspect. They found plenty of damning evidence tying him to the crime, including surveillance footage of him buying murder supplies, along with videos of him purchasing first aid supplies after the murders for some cuts on his hands. Authorities also recovered a journal detailing Joel Jr.'s plans to slaughter his parents. He was found guilty of murder and abuse of a corpse and was sentenced to life in prison despite his request to receive the death penalty if convicted. 8. Spoiled brat. On June 15, 2013, 16-year-old Ethan Couch got behind the wheel while drunk and under the influence of drugs and ended up causing a deadly accident in Burleson, Texas. He was going 70 miles per hour through a 40 mile per hour residential area with 7 teenage passengers in his vehicle when he crashed into a group of people standing by a disabled SUV. Couch struck several vehicles before rolling his truck and hitting a tree. 4 people died and 9 were injured, including one of Couch's passengers who was completely paralyzed in the wreck. Couch was convicted of 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter. Before his sentencing, his lawyers argued that he needed rehabilitation rather than prison, based on a psychologist's claim that he suffered from a so-called condition called affluenza, meaning that Couch lacked an appropriate understanding of boundaries because his wealthy parents had essentially raised him without rules. The judge sentenced the young man to 10 years of probation and ordered him to undergo psychiatric care. Many were outraged by what they saw as a shockingly lenient punishment, but Couch's actions would later catch up with him. In 2015, federal authorities apprehended him in Mexico after he fell out of touch with his probation officer and was seen at a party drinking. He received a 2-year prison sentence and was released in 2018. Couch appears to have stayed mostly out of trouble since then, minus a brief jail stint for an alleged marijuana-related probation violation. 7. Tommy Gilbert Jr. As the son of a wealthy New York City hedge fund boss, Tommy Gilbert Jr. grew up in the lap of luxury. He attended elite private schools before going on to Princeton University and was often present at high society events where he mingled with other members of the upper crust. But things changed in 2015 when Gilbert's millionaire father stopped paying his $2,400 per month rent and cut his weekly spending allowance from $800 to $300. In addition to the cash handout and providing their son with a place to live, the Gilberts kept him on his father's company payroll even though he didn't seem to actually work. His father financed his upscale lifestyle in other ways, often covering as much as $10,000 worth of expenses every month. By the time they started limiting their generosity, Tommy was 30 years old, and it's probably safe to assume that his dad simply wanted him to become more independent, but that's not how he saw it. After the sudden financial cutoff, he went to his parents' apartment and asked his mother to run out and fetch him something to eat. She had a bad feeling about leaving the 2 men alone, and when she returned, her son was gone and her husband was dead on the floor with a single gunshot wound to the head. The younger Gilbert tried to make it look like a suicide, but his mother knew instantly that he killed his dad, and she ended up testifying against him in court. Tommy was convicted of his father's murder and received a prison sentence of 30 years to life. 6. Arrogant Akash. A young man from India's Haryana state made international headlines in 2019 when he received a BMW for his birthday from his parents and pushed it into a river because it wasn't good enough for him. Known only as Akash, he reportedly wanted a Jaguar and felt that the BMW wasn't big enough for him and his buddies to cruise around in. Viral footage shows the car slipping beneath the water before it was removed from the river using a crane. Witnesses reported seeing Akash jump out of the vehicle just before it reached deep waters and said that onlookers helped him to safety. A police spokesperson seemed less than amused by the incident, stating that the department would carry out a preliminary investigation, but that this seems to be a personal matter. He also described the young man as arrogant. Akash's father told the press that a BMW was the best that he and his wife could afford to give their son for his birthday, and while they knew it wasn't the Jaguar he'd asked for, they figured he'd be happy enough with it. In his own words, the father stated, "We never imagined he would do anything like this." 5. Obsessed student. When 46-year-old schoolteacher Rebecca Whitehurst noticed a visibly upset student during one of her lessons at a school in Manchester, England in 2019, she reached out to the boy in hopes of helping him get on a better path. As part of her efforts, she invited him to attend one of her mindfulness sessions in hopes of improving the boy's mental health. In exchange for her good deed, Whitehurst was met with horrifying allegations of abuse against the student, who's less than half her age. The accusations included unspeakable acts of misconduct against the boy that supposedly happened in the teacher's car and over WhatsApp. Soon enough, Whitehurst found herself in court facing 3 charges related to the alleged abuse. Prosecutors claimed that she'd become involved with the pupil on an unlawful level. Meanwhile, the disgraced educator's defense lawyer argued that while Whitehurst could have handled the situation better, the student was far from being a victim and was the real abuser. The teen had targeted the teacher with threats and manipulation. Her attorneys also accused the boy of faking the supposedly inappropriate WhatsApp conversations between the pair. On the stand, Whitehurst testified that the teen had contacted her on Snapchat and told her that he was in love with her. She made it clear that he was behaving inappropriately, but that it didn't stop him from approaching her on numerous occasions when she was in the classroom alone and making physical advances toward her. He allegedly forced his tongue down her throat, and when she repelled his conduct, he spat in her face and slapped her repeatedly about 10 times. Describing herself as gullible, Whitehurst said she felt stupid for giving her non-professional contact information to a student, and that her embarrassment stopped her from reporting the situation. She tried to discourage further contact by telling the boy she was going into the hospital and wouldn't have access to her phone, and by telling him she no longer wanted to interact. But he relentlessly pursued her with what seemed like an unstoppable determination to see her in a romantic capacity. Thankfully, after hearing Whitehurst's side of things, a jury acquitted her of all charges. 4. Drunken regrets. In early 2016, a drunk 4th-year neurology resident named Anjali Ramkissoon was filmed attacking an Uber driver and throwing his belongings out of his vehicle in an unchecked fit of rage. The 30-year-old allegedly got into the Uber without a reservation and threw a fit when the driver asked her to exit the car. Shocking footage captured by Juan Cinco, the man who'd ordered the car, shows the woman kicking and punching the driver, who avoids escalating the situation and simply walks away. Ramkissoon then appears to get into his passenger seat and toss his mail, phone, and other personal items into the street, all while calling him horrible names and hurling vicious insults at him. The driver called 911 and reported that his attackers left bruises on him. Ramkissoon overheard the conversation and mocked him for complaining about being hit by a 100-pound woman. By the time the police arrived, Ramkissoon was attempting to get into a taxi. They removed her from it and instead put her in a police car, at which point she began to cry and apologize profusely for her behavior. She went on national TV a few days later to issue a public apology and managed to avoid a civil lawsuit from the driver, who was kind enough to take a small cash settlement. However, the damage was done. Not only had Ramkissoon made a fool of herself in a viral video clip that had reached millions of viewers, she was fired from her residency at a Miami hospital. 3. Misguided discipline. A fed-up father from southern France went viral earlier this year after he unintentionally cut his entire town's access to the internet. This was his desperate attempt to cut down his own kid's addictive screen time. Traditional parenting methods apparently hadn't worked when the creative dad got his hands on a scrambler and used it to block his children from going online between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning. Locals began reporting outages during the same hours, during which time they found themselves without internet or cell phone service. When it wasn't immediately clear why it kept happening, their internet providers began to dig deeper into the matter. The investigation was soon escalated to national authorities, who used a special device to detect and locate the jammer, which was also affecting internet service in nearby towns. Scramblers are illegal in France, and the father's now facing penalties in court over the unconventional disciplinary tool. He faces up to 6 months in prison and a possible 5-figure fine, and it's safe to assume that his neighbors are less than happy with him. The unusual predicament serves as a reminder that even when someone's kids refuse to follow the rules and do whatever they want, it's a good idea to make sure that the solution doesn't involve anyone who's not involved. 2. Bossy bridezilla. Unsure of whether she was in the wrong, a woman by the username Cinnamon Magpie recently took to Reddit's Am I the Arsehole forum to ask for advice about her friend's seemingly excessive wedding-related requests. After spending excessive time and effort on a custom handmade gift at the bride's request, the friend was contacted by the bride, who said that she noticed that the friend hadn't bought anything off her gift registry yet. In response, she told the bride that money was tight. The bride then told her that she better hurry up and buy one of the more reasonably priced gifts before other guests buy them all. At that point, the friend took a more firm stance, explaining how much he spent on materials for the handmade gift the bride had asked her for, and saying that she wasn't buying anything from the registry. Still, the bride insisted on also receiving a registry gift, and when the friend continued to say no, she called her a rude name and hung up. Redditors were quick to take the friend's side, with one person describing the bridezilla's attitude as next-level entitlement. Another commentator pointed out that the handmade gift was probably the most heartfelt item the ungrateful bride would receive. Hopefully, the overwhelming support the friend received reassured her that she was not in the wrong. 1. Mom takes matters into her own hands. A North Dakota mother's Facebook advertisement for a pair of Katy Perry tickets went viral in 2014. She offered them up online with a dose of brutal honesty about how she was selling them to teach her spoiled brat daughter a lesson. Cindy Bjerke told local station WDAZ that she got rid of the tickets to discipline the girl for being disrespectful. She sold them for $90 after paying $110 originally, along with the caption stating, "Daughter is a spoiled brat and doesn't deserve these tickets." They sold in less than 5 minutes. Several commentators praised Bjerke for holding her daughter accountable for her behavior, while others said that she could have kept the personal details out of the post. Some even sympathized with Bjerke's daughter, whom they imagined most likely felt humiliated. Speaking with WDAZ, Bjerke said that she never meant to embarrass her daughter, but stood by her decision to take what she felt was an appropriate course of action after her kids stepped out of line. And regardless of whether or not the post was inappropriate, she was resolute in her decision to take the concert tickets away, stating, "I was not going to let her go to this concert with this behavior that she's been doing." Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a friend tell you that your heartfelt gift isn't good enough and that you need to get them something else, or find out that your new partner used your credit card while you're asleep without asking? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.